All right, everybody. We are way out on Long Island, Suffolk County, specifically Port Jefferson Station. And why are we out here today? Well, let this be kind of like a part two, kind of an addendum, I think that's the word, to my Vito Arena upload. Now, if you haven't seen that, please do. Please check that out. What have you been doing with yourself? So we're out here to look at a couple of locations on Long Island. One location being where we're heading now, 1039 Route 112 in Port Jefferson Station. And it would be at that address of 1039 that Vito Arena, who was approaching 40 years old, and his boyfriend Joey Lee, 22-year-old Joey Lee, would be arrested on June 5th of 1982 inside Good Earth Chinese restaurant. Now, what were they doing at that time? What was the Roy Demeo crew, car thief, doing at that time? See these houses, see this area. And just for reference, like, this is way outside New York City limits. I mean, we are, I don't know what I could use for reference. Let's say the Gemini Lounge, use that as a reference point. We're over 50 miles away from there. To some people that live in like rural areas, or maybe there's not much going on and wherever in the United States or another country, maybe that's not much, but with the highways, with the traffic patterns, with everything else, I mean, I'm about an hour and a half to 2 hours from Canarsie, Brooklyn, way out here in Port Jefferson Station, Long Island. So by 1982, Vito Arena had already disappeared. He was not with the crew. He was nowhere to be found. He was hiding out here in Port Jefferson Station, and he was wanted by authorities, him and Joey Lee. He was wanted by authorities in Brooklyn and authorities on Long Island, specifically the New Hyde Park area. Because what him and Joey Lee were doing at that time was they were robbing dentist offices, they were robbing also real estate agents. So they would do this scheme where Vito Arena, being almost 20 years older than Joey Lee, they would do this father and son scheme where they would go to dentist's office and Vito would make appointments, for his son. They would go there and they would end up robbing these dentists. In one incident, they made an appointment to look at a house that was for sale. Once again, father and son coming to look at a house. Oh, open house, let's go make an appointment with the real estate agent. They would go there. They would rob the real estate agent and rob belongings in that house. And they were wanted for numerous robberies in the Brooklyn area, in the Long Island area, in Massapequa as well. So he was hiding from Roy, but he had time to do a robbery in Roy's neighborhood of Massapequa. And on June 5th of 1982, it would all come to an end for Vito Arena and Joey Lee. After hiding out here in Port Jefferson Station, they would come to this shopping center that we're walking towards right now. And they would say, oh, we need some Chinese food, we're hungry. They would go in the shopping center to get that Chinese food. Now, Vito, as I mentioned at the time, was not in the presence of the crew, the Demeo crew, anymore. However, he had committed numerous crimes before meeting up with them and with them. I mean, by the time he met up with Roy Demeo's crew, I mean, he had already claimed to steal over 6,000 cars. He had over 11 arrests for a wide variety of crimes: petty larceny, grand theft auto, possession of guns. These arrests going back to the 1960s. He had also been involved in a number of murders with the crew, like the murders of Khalid Dowd and Ronald Falcaro, which took place inside Broadway Freddie Denomi's auto shop. This particular murder being where the story of eating pizza and cutting up bodies actually comes from, when Roy sent Henry and him out to get pizza and hot dogs while they were cutting up the bodies inside the shop. He'd be involved in the murder of Patrick Penny with Roy Demeo and Richie Denomi, Broadway Freddie's brother. This murder obviously stemming from Patrick Penny being a witness in the homicide of James and Jimmy Ippolito in October of 1979, a homicide that happened on the side of the Belt Parkway in Brooklyn. And of course, he would also be involved in the murder of one Joseph Scorney in September of 1978. A murder committed by him and Richie Denomi. All the while, Ronald Bulldog Turekian looked out on the outside. The gun used also being Ronald Bulldog's gun. So by June of 1982, Vito and Joey Lee were hiding out here. As I mentioned, they were wanted for numerous robberies, and they would come to this shopping center where we're going right now to sit down and eat some Chinese food. And we're going to go to where exactly that Chinese restaurant was, the Good Earth Chinese restaurant. So let's cross over now. Let's talk about exactly what happened inside that restaurant. So at 1039 Route 12 here in Jefferson Station, inside that Chinese restaurant, would be a man by the name of Sergeant Stephen Marks, who was a Brooklyn sergeant out of New York City. And he just happened to be there eating with his family while Joey Lee and Vito Arena sit inside. And he's looking at these two guys and he's saying to himself, man, these guys look really familiar. They look like the sketch of the guys that are wanted for the robberies. I better call some backup, because I'm pretty sure I'm looking at this obese man wanted for the robberies and this young man of 22 years old. And of course, they knew about the father-son scheme at that point. So looking at this older guy approaching 40 and this young kid, I say kid, 22 years old, you know, it all seemed to fit for Sergeant Stephen Marks. So right there where it says Beauty Center, that is 1039 Route 112 here in Port Jefferson Station. That is the former location of the Good Earth Chinese food restaurant. And if you would have been here on June 5th, 1982, there's a good chance you would have seen Vito Arena and Joey Lee being arrested. Right inside this beauty center would be where it would all end for these two. It would kind of all just be the beginning for many other things. But as far as his criminal career in the 1980s, it was going to end. And he was going to become a star witness in one of the most brutal and interesting cases in New York City criminal history. Of course, the case against Paul Castellano and the Roy Demeo crew, stemming from the indictments brought down in 1984, when over 20 members of the Roy Demeo crew and Paul Castellano would be indicted for their murderous ring involving drugs, car thievery, contract killings, pornography, and an abundance of other crimes. So once again, on June 5th of 82, it would all end inside where it says Beauty Center the former location of the Good Earth Chinese restaurant. They would haul Vito Arena and Joey Lee out of this place. And the newspaper would have a funny headline. I think it would say, Sergeant gets egg drop on robbers. I'll put up that paper. Then they talk about something about Chinese proverbs, you know, making jokes and all that. So what would happen after this, though? Well, almost immediately, Vito Arena starts spitting out all this shit about, I know about this murder, I know about this murder, I know about these guys in Brooklyn, they're killing everybody, I know about this and that. And he starts immediately becoming a government witness, or a rat, if you want to say that. And the first thing he's going to talk about is the murder of one Joseph Scorney. All right, everybody, we are even farther out. We are in Center Moriches, Long Island. So on September 28th, 1978, inside Richie Denomi's auto shop, Vito Arena, Richie Denomi, and Bulldog Terekian outside looking out would execute Joseph Scorney, the 28-year-old car thief. Vito Arena would shoot him, and Richie Denomi would finish him off with a sledgehammer. After the murder, they would make their way into Manhattan, and they would get Chinese food. It seems like Vito loves Chinese food. That seems to be a theme. Ultimately, the body of Joseph Scorney will be placed in a 55-gallon drum and filled with cement. Now, the reasons for this murder, according to Vito Arena, is that Joseph Scorney had threatened the lives of Richie Denomi's children if anything were to happen to his Porsche that he kept in Richie's shop. Richie would tell this to Vito, and Vito would say, why don't you just move his Porsche, get it out of your garage? Richie would tell Vito, well, he also wants to push you out of the auto business. That's what he told me. So, Vito would join Richie in the execution of Joseph Scorney. An execution that not everybody was a fan of. Vito Arena having a presence that not everybody was a fan of either at that time. Pete the Pick LaFrosia would later tell me this in reference to Joseph Scorney's murder.
All right, that's one thing. But that guy, maybe from being away, you come home, you have a different, your how can I say, your vibes are different in a lot of ways. And as soon as I met this guy, I just didn't feel right. You know what I mean? Something about it didn't make me right, you know? And God, as a matter of fact, that's what actually saved me, you know what I mean? Because, you know, Roy said something to me one day, and I told Roy, I said, listen, Roy, you should speak. I know you're not. I said, I don't know, but there's a chance that you might ask me to go somewhere with this guy. I said to him, I said, you know, Roy, I says, I tell you, you do that, I'm going to listen to what you ask me. I'm going to guarantee you this. Only one of us is coming back. What do you mean? I told him, I said, Roy, you can tell me what you want, but I know the story. Well, he made his ball. I said, Roy, when you're friends with somebody, you usually doing things together, and you're in the shop working, and the guy's in front of you with something, and you shoot this motherfucker from behind, that's not making your bones right, because this guy didn't do nothing fucking wrong to them. They did it just to rob him. They robbed his car. They went to his house, robbed his fucking money. And the way they shot him was terrible. They shot him. The guy turned around and said, what are you doing? Because the gun misfired, what I'm hearing, right? And he shot him again. Second time the gun don't work. The guy went down on his knees.
Nonetheless, this would be a murder that would put Vito Arena in the good graces of Roy Demeo, enabling him to join up with the crew in 1978. Now, after Scorney's death, they would go out to eat, and later on, Vito Arena and Joey Lee would go to Scorney's home. Having possession of his keys, they would go into his apartment and ransack it and take whatever they could. The next morning, Richie Demeo would wake up from a nightmare. A nightmare consisting of Joseph Scorney's hand sticking out of a 55-gallon drum filled with concrete. He would call up his brother, Broadway Freddie Demeo, who lived in neighboring Shirley, Long Island, neighboring to where we are right now. And he would say, I have to get rid of this body. It's in a 55-gallon drum of concrete. I need your help. Freddie would say, just dump it in the ocean. Richie would drive over 60 miles out from Brooklyn all the way here with this body in his automobile. Freddie would give him directions to a dock at the end of Union Avenue, which is about a mile off Montauk Highway in Moriches, Long Island. Richie would say, just come with me. I don't want to get lost. So they would come here where they would dump the body of Joseph Scorney. And we're going to go take a look at this dock. This dock which leads out to what is known as Moriches Bay. A bay which once held the body of 28-year-old car thief Joseph Scorney, who was murdered on September 28th, 1978. And as I mentioned in the location we were at previously, over in Port Jefferson Station, this would be one of the first things that Vito Arena would tell authorities after being arrested with Joey Lee on June 5th of 1982. And believe it or not, by June 9th of 1982, authorities were already here with Vito Arena and Joey Lee, who were on hand to witness a crew of authorities and professionals equipped with being able to lift heavy objects out of water such as these. So on June 9th of 1982, everybody would come right here to where we are. Moriches Bay. Now I'm going to put a picture up from where I think exactly this photo was taken. You could see the homes to the left there, which line up with the image at the end of Union Avenue in Moriches. We'll get a full look at the bay here. So just imagine on September 29th, the following day, on September 29th of 1978, Broadway Freddie, Richie coming here, throwing this barrel right over into this bay water. And it would be about 5 years later when it will be pulled out on June 9th, 1982. And this is very important because it showed authorities right away that Vito might have been nuts, but so far he was telling the truth. And it would be his testimony which would help bring down the Roy Demeo crew. Of course, January of 1983, Roy Demeo would be murdered and he would never get to see his day in court. However, he would be alive for a few months to know that Vito was telling his story. Let's walk to the end of the dock. Look at these seagulls here. These are some of the fattiest, chunkiest seagulls I've ever seen. We'll walk up there, we'll get a whole view of the bay. Now, as the 80s went on, of course, Vito will become a star witness, and like I said earlier in this upload, please go watch my Vito Arena upload, where you could learn more about him, learn about some of his antics while becoming a witness in trial against the remaining Demeo crew members in Castellano. And of course, Richie Denomi would never make trial either. He would be murdered in 1984 in his Gravesend apartment. Broadway Freddy would make trial, joining Vito Arena as a witness. However, these two didn't get on well. Vito Arena would accuse Freddy of many things. He would accuse him of being a man who loved cutting people up. He would accuse him of being a racist. He would say all types of things about Freddy. However, it would seem that Vito wanted all the attention for himself, as you will see in the upload that I did on Vito Arena. So once again, we are out here in Santa Moriches, Long Island, looking at Moriches Bay. A bay which once held the body of 28-year-old car thief Joseph Scorney, who lost his life in Brooklyn and ended up here. I hope you have all enjoyed this upload. Please like, subscribe, and tell anybody you know that would be interested in New York City crime spot.